I'm about to say something that is a fact, but it for some reason is going to upset a lot of free-to-play players watching this. Zenkai Awakening your old units is almost always going to be a better value than summoning on new banners with the new Zenkai Awakening system. In this video, I'm going to give you the math and explain why. So first and foremost, let's go over a couple examples of Zenkai Awakenings that have been really good and stood the test of time for quite a while. At the start of April, we had the first Zenkai Awakening for a Legends Road unit in Youth Goku, and he turned out to be really good, getting the endurance buff that he got, as well as having a massive stat buff and a massive ability buff all the way around made him an absolute beast to this day. Obviously, the cost of this was just your time, not necessarily any crystals themselves being spent, just going ahead and spending your time grinding out tickets to summon for them. Now, obviously, some units are going to be better than others when Zenkai Awakened. They're going to be good at the time, maybe, but not stand the test of time, so to speak. But in the case of Cooler, I think over 2 months after release of his Zenkai Awakened form, he is still really good and definitely very meta relevant, especially at high Zenkai Awakened levels. Stat-wise, he holds up, ability-wise, he holds up, and every single time we're going to have a new release of a Lineage of Evil unit, obviously the buff, the enabler of crit rate buff, is going to be absolutely massive for that unit and bring him right back into the meta, just like he really has been for a long time. It's just now, personally, on his own, he can affect the battle and still do a lot of damage despite being an older unit because he was Zenkai Awakened. And it's absolutely worth mentioning that if people put the crystals in, which again at the old system is over 20,000 a lot of the time, to go ahead and max out a level 7 Awakened unit, obviously that is going to be an absolute powerhouse pretty much no matter which one it ends up being. They just don't end up sticking around in the meta necessarily because, again, people don't want to spend 20,000 crystals to max them out in the first place. And obviously some Zenkai Awakenable units are going to get less useful over time as power creep happens, as new units come out that break the ceiling on what you can expect from new units. All in all, it is going to give you a lot of value though, especially if you consider the new system versus the old system. Now I'm going to go ahead and give you guys some pure facts here. These are inarguable. They are 100% accurate. I have done the math and figured this out, and you cannot argue with them. You can only argue with my conclusion because of them. At 100 crystals per summon with no additional bonuses, if you spend 20,000 crystals, you are getting 200 pulls with a 1% chance at pulling a brand new unit. That is going to give you an 87% chance of having pulled that unit by the amount of time you spend 20,000 crystals. That's a pretty good shot at pulling them. And honestly, if you consider the value you get out of step-up banners or just legendary finish banners in general, a lot of the time you're going to be getting even more than the average. Maybe there are other things that you want to pull on the banners that aren't necessarily featured or aren't necessarily the top tier unit that everybody wants, like in the case of the Vegito Blue banner, where if you spent 20,000 crystals optimally, you'd have about a 2/3 or 67% chance of pulling him. Even if you don't get him though, obviously you could walk away with a unit that you are very happy with, or units that you're very happy with that you've pulled with those crystals. So in the old system, where again it costs about 20,000 crystals to max out a unit, give or take, it is almost always going to be better to go ahead and spend and chase new units than go ahead and spend on an old unit that got a Zenkai Awakening. I think there are a couple exceptions to this rule. Again, the free-to-play ones are obviously going to be a major exception because it's just your time you're spending, no crystals, so obviously it's going to be worth it. And maybe Cooler or other ones that fall into a similar vein as far as how powerful they are and their lasting value, you could argue is more worth it to go for them as opposed to spending on a new banner. However, it is really important to take into account that now it's going to cost almost 13,000 crystals less on average to max Zenkai Awaken any new unit. And with those 7,000 crystals, you have roughly a 50-50 chance of pulling any 1% unit again on any normal banner that you're chasing by spending all of your crystals. And even more significant than that, if you were pulling on the Vegito Blue step-up banners, you'd have roughly a 3 in 10 or 30% chance of pulling Vegito Blue. Those odds aren't great, and that's if you optimally spend them over the two banners. This is compared to having nearly 100% of the Awakening Z power you'll need to maximum Zenkai Zenkai awaken a given new unit with the new system. And even going to the worst case scenario that I talked about before, you're only going to have maybe a few hundred more crystals to spend at the very most to go ahead and finish up your Zenkai awakening. I think you might be able to see now why it becomes a lot more of a thing that you should consider if you're a free-to-play player. Legendary finish units, Legends limited units generally, and powerful new units that are objectively really power creeped and really good upon release are obviously still something that you may want to take into consideration when you're planning on how to spend your new crystals. But if you're thinking long-term, you're trying to figure out the best value you can possibly get out of them, then you have to take into account how significantly they decrease the price of Zenkai Awakening as a whole, and how ridiculous the value is once you've spent those crystals on a Zenkai Awakening that's worth getting. If it's a high-quality awakening and it's on a team that you already enjoy running, that you have a lot of resources put into, especially as a free-to-play player, it is going to be your best value per crystal, period, and it's not even a competition. I see a lot of people saying that they would just grind out the missions for a Zenkai Awakening and then call it quits, never actually bother summoning on those banners, and I totally get why. With the old system where you needed to spend over 3,000 crystals on average to just awaken one level, let alone multiple. But with the new system, a free-to-play player should absolutely be considering spending on a Zenkai Awakenable unit that just came out. Chasing uncertain buffs to your team where maybe you'll get it, maybe you won't, because obviously nothing is guaranteed, is obviously not going to be the way to get continual buffs to your team. Whereas if you spend on Zenkai Awakening, you are guaranteed to have a top tier unit on that team if you, again, wait until something comes out that's actually worth awakening. I know it definitely seems like it's worse at first glance if you're a free-to-play player, but once this happens, you guys are going to see just how significantly the meta of the game overall changes because of it, and it will definitely be in the favor of free-to-play players. Getting new units is never a guarantee. You guys have seen enough summoning videos from all of us YouTubers that play the game to know that for a fact. You are never guaranteed anything in this game, and you can spend an unreasonable amount of money on crystals trying to chase something down and not even get a single copy of it, even though you absolutely should have by that point in time. But maxing out a Zenkai Awakenable unit that just came out with the brand new system is not going to cost a lot, especially if you consider the amount of crystals you get on a monthly basis just by playing the game as a free-to-play player, which, by the way, we are going to talk about in just a minute. If you've already put a ton of resources, whether that be multi-Z power, your free-to-play crystals, or other things like your time into getting a team that's definitely really good and worth using in PvP for a long term, then spending 7,000 crystals once every few months to get a new unit for your team that's going to be top tier is definitely not a bad idea. Just think about it, okay? If you just want to get specific units from the show that you really enjoyed watching, that you think are really cool for whatever reason, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to be competitive, you want to play as optimally as you can and spend your crystals where they're going to give you the most value, then obviously the new answer is to Zenkai Awaken units if they fit on the main team that you're trying to put all your resources into maxing out. One final note, I noticed a lot of people saying that they don't get enough free-to-play crystals as a free-to-play player to go ahead and justify spending 7,000 because it's going to take you months to save up 7,000 crystals, and that just isn't true. See, you may not keep track of it, but it just so happens that a person by the name of Luigiani, who you can check out on Reddit, has posted every single month the rewards of crystals that you're going to get by playing the game normally. This includes login rewards, it includes compensation, it includes your PvP missions, it includes events, it includes story, and everything else that comes out in that month. And it just so happens for the last 3 months and before that, you have gotten over 11,000 crystals if you got top PvP rewards, and over 9,000 crystals if you didn't, by just playing the game and getting all of the free-to-play crystals you possibly can. If you don't believe me, you can check exactly what Luigiani did on Reddit. Again, they're all posted on his profile. You can just go there and check it out yourself. So in my opinion, and based on the facts, obviously this is going to be a fundamental change in the way you have to think about things as a free-to-play player if you want to be competitive, or as competitive as possible, in Dragon Ball Legends. Obviously, players that are really good at the game can be free-to-play, and they can get away with getting just a 2-star new unit and absolutely decimating every competition with it. But I'm talking about optimal value. I'm talking about taking all the facts into account and figuring out where you're going to get the most value possible out of your crystals. And in this case, Zenkai Awakening is the way to go. That's just how it is. It's changing, and obviously over time, you're gonna have to make the decision as to whether or not it's personally worth it for you to invest in a particular unit you have at 7+ stars to go ahead and max them out as far as the level 7 Awakening is concerned. So yeah, guys, let me know what you think down in the comment section below. I know a couple days ago that video sort of threw people off a little bit, and people were kind of questioning me down in the comments, and I just wanted to make this video to sort of fully explain my point of view, and then hopefully help out some newer players or some free-to-play players that kind of don't really understand Zenkai Awakening and the new system, because obviously at first glance it does look worse, but it in fact is much better and much more free-to-play friendly than it ever was before. So I will see you in the next one. As always, have a fantastic day, and until then, guys, peace.